Hello, I am Ken Halanych. I'm also a member of the Research Board. I welcome you to the last panel of the day. I am very happy to do this last panel, not because it's the last panel, but because it is highlighting our research scholars and is really about looking forward and about looking to what the future holds in the next generation of scientists. One of the interesting things with GoMRI and when the board first formed, GoMRI was a response, right? It was a response to the Deepwater Horizon incident. But even from very early on, the board was very interested in building resources, in looking forward, and in developing both science in the Gulf region as well as science in dealing with oil spills and hydrocarbons. And one of the best ways to do that was to invest in scholars and the next generation of scientists. So we were incredibly excited about that. In a minute, I'll introduce you to the four scholars up on stage, and they will each tell you their own story and what their experience has been like, and hopefully a little bit about where they're going. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you a little bit about the scholarship program and just how successful it's been. As a board member, I've been just sort of in awe of these numbers in terms of how big and successful this program has been. To be a GoMRI scholar, you have to focus on GoMRI-funded research for at least a year. We have had over 600 PhD level scholars. We have had over 550 master's level scholars. We have supported over 1,000 undergraduates, and we've also supported 100 high schoolers. And that's pretty impressive. It's across a broad range. And that's in addition to postdocs being supported and other early career scientists. One of the things that I'm going to ask is that this panel is going to be very much driven by questions. So everybody sort of slowed down with filling out their little white cards. If you have questions for the students, please go ahead and start jotting them down and raising them up in the air. So I'm going to let each of the panelists sort of introduce themselves. If you could tell us who you are, sort of a little bit about your background, where you've been, and then also a little bit about how GoMRI-funded research has sort of shifted your perspective on research and how it's influenced your career. So, Kathryn, why don't you?
Okay, sure. Hi, my name is Kathryn Keating. I'm a PhD candidate at LSU in the Department of Sociology. So I became involved with the GoMRI-funded Resilient Children, Youth, and Communities project in 2016 as a first-year PhD student. And I have a background in social work, so I had just finished my MSW. I had been working in rural communities and integrated behavioral health settings, and I came into my program with a general interest in child and family health, resilience, and healthcare. And I started working on the RCYC project with Dr. Slack, my advisor, and it's a mixed methods project that looks at a cohort of families with children under age 18 who lived in Louisiana at the time of the spill. And the project employs a three-wave survey along with some focus groups. And when I joined the project, it was during active data collection. So we were actively out in the field doing face-to-face surveys with the parents that were a part of the RCYC cohort. And that was an experience and an opportunity that has tremendously impacted what I see as my future career path, and also just my perspective on research. So as I said, I had a background in social work, and I came in during the active data collection and really got to sort of jump in and engage in project management and outreach with the people that were part of our project. And now that I'm towards the end of my PhD, I'm working on my dissertation with data from the RCYC project. And one of the things that this work has done for me specifically is it really helped me sort of sharpen my focus and sort of illuminate a path for me in work related to Gulf issues and coastal communities. And it also gave me an opportunity and access to mentorship within our project itself, but then also in the larger GoMRI community. And coming to GoMoses and being able to present my research gave me some of my first experience sort of communicating my research to an interdisciplinary audience and learning how to engage in interdisciplinary conversations as a social scientist, and sort of learn how to weave my social work perspective into that as well. I guess that's a little bit about my path here, and thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel.
Thank you. Kate?
I am Kaitlin Fraiser from Scripps Institution of Oceanography. Can't hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So my name's Kaitlin Fraiser from Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UC San Diego. And I got involved with the Gulf Research Program really early on. So in 2009, I was a graduate student just pulling my head out of my first year classes when the oil spill happened. And so my advisor, John Hildebrand, had the foresight to throw some passive acoustic recording instruments into the Gulf quickly with a rapid response grant from NSF, I believe. And then he came by my office and said, "Why don't you figure out those pesky dolphins?" And so from there, I've been working on dolphin acoustics in the Gulf of Mexico. And what that has led to is a focus on big data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence applications in the context of GoMRI research. So because we're collecting really large amounts of acoustic recording data, and the questions that GoMRI has posed are so big, and answers are needed so quickly, that's really just propelled the whole field of marine mammal passive acoustics and my own research to the cutting edge for the past decade. And that's been the thing that's been most kind of shaped my career from this experience. We were pulled into Sea Image under Steve Murawski, and that experience was just phenomenal because I was able to meet researchers of, with lifetimes of experience and talk to them one-on-one. We had panels and tutorials that really helped establish strategies for being successful as a scientist, and I'm just really grateful for being part of that family for so many years. I will definitely miss that as this comes to an end, and that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Cheng? You're up.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cheng Li. I was a graduate student at Johns Hopkins University, and I'm now working at National Energy Technology Lab, Department of Energy. So in 2010, I just started my graduate study. My initial study was not on oil spill, was on the bottom boundary layer study over the New Jersey Bay. And during the 1 month intimate interaction with sea and the field trip is really the beautiful sea, and the beautiful image really strikes me. I was amazed by how beautiful and how powerful the wave is. Definitely, Deepwater Horizon oil spill set some special meaning for that beautiful image, and I think the necessity to conduct quantitative research on oil spill becomes personal to me. And I feel thrilled to become one part of this GoMRI family, and I'm really grateful that I have the opportunity to build my own wave tank from scratch and to specially design for oil spill studies. So the initial objective of this study is to get some baseline data of droplet size, initial droplet size distributions immediately after the breaking wave interacting with the oil slick. And one thing special about the Deepwater Horizon oil spill is that there's a large amount of dispersant that have been being applied to trying to disperse the oil initially. So roughly 200 million gallons of oil has been spilled, and roughly 2 million, about 1% of Corexit 9500A is applied both subsea and by aero spray. So both the public and the research community was not really sure what is the exact effect quantitatively will affect the dispersion process of the oil spill. And the initial research was on that, and I'm very excited about this research because I know that some of my research may possibly help develop better models for the oil spill modelers. And as I know that in 2010, the oil spill model used was based on the over 30 years old Delvin Spinney 1988 study, and those studies didn't account for the dispersant effects. And after application of dispersant, there's a lot of concerns because a very tiny little small droplets are generated. Does it affect the dispersion process? Will it generate some aerosol particles that will be really harmful for the human lungs, et cetera, et cetera? So yeah, so this is the really applied research that I'm doing. As a lot of previous panelists mentioned, that it's not only basic applied research, but it's also some basic research. So in general, this research is multi-phase flow research that is really basic research. It's a subfield of multi-phase flow. And now I'm working at National Energy Technology Lab. It's still, I'm also working on the multi-phase flow system. It's a little bit different system. For oil spill project, I'm doing focus on the oil as the dispersed phase and seawater as the continuous phase. Now at DOE, I'm working with particles as the dispersed phase and gas as the continuous phase. So I would say GoMRI funded research really helped me prepare well for my job role at DOE, and I'm really grateful for that, and I'm really happy and excited to be here.
Thank you. Nikaela?
Thank you, Ken. So I'm Nikaela Flournoy. So my experience into being introduced to GoMRI funded work is a little bit different. So in 2010, when the spill happened, I had finished up my master's in 2009 in infectious diseases at the University of Iowa, and I was working with embryonic stem cells. And so at that moment, you see the real-time footage, the oil being released into the water column. I knew I wanted to go back to graduate school to finish up my PhD. And so I reached out to my old mentor at the time, Dr. Wendy Morey, and asked her, who could she, point me to? And she had brought up a conference that she went to where she heard Patricia Sebeki give a talk on gas hydrates in the Gulf. And so that's when I reached out to Dr. Sebeki at the University of Alabama, and I joined her lab in 2011. And so my research initially started off with working with tar balls and analyzing the microbial community using genomic approaches. And from there, during my graduate career, that's when the Alabama Center for Ecological Resistance was funded by GoMRI, better known as the ACER Consortium, where I was rolled into the nitrogen cycling subgroup led up by Behzad Mortazavi. And so essentially, my work has focused on looking at the impacts of the 2010 oil spill on a long-term aspect in terms of how did it impact the microdiversity and composition function as it relates to the denitrifiers within the microbial community and salt marsh sediments. Since then, it also rolled into my postdoctoral work as well. And so from there, I would say that the opportunities that I've been provided through my graduate education and my postdoctoral work with the ACER Consortium has allowed me to have collaborative opportunities with other postdocs in my area, specifically within the nitrogen cycling subgroup. The interdisciplinary aspect is bar none. It allows you to think outside the box, as well as the societal relevance of the work as well, because the nitrogen cycle that I work with, I focus specifically on nitrogen removal. And the fact that it's an ecosystem service, while the general public doesn't appreciate biogeochemical cycles like that, is extremely important regarding system sustainability when you have disturbances similar to oil spills in the Gulf. In terms of, from a professional development perspective, the fact that as both graduate student and postdoc, I was given access to being involved with all hands meetings with our consortium. Most graduate students don't get an opportunity to be involved with. So my first all hands meeting, I was literally sitting on the sidelines, watching, observing. But as a postdoc, I was given the opportunity with one of my fellow postdocs in Dr. Morizavi's lab to actually present our work, present our findings. And that's substantive as a postdoc, getting those type of opportunities. Currently, I am a postdoc with the Alabama Water Institute, headed up by Dr. Patricia Sabecki at the University of Alabama. And I am also a 2020 Mirzayan Science Policy Fellow with the Gulf Research Program at the National Academies of Science in Washington, D.C.
Great, thank you. Well, we have gotten a couple questions. I'm happy to tell you none of them are about your advisors, so that's good. I'm just going to randomly pick. Kate, I'll start with you. What could GoMRI have done differently to engage students or to improve the program?
So I think within the consortium, the engagement was really high. We had these, like I said, these events that were led by outreach members within the consortium that would do things like bring all the students together and talk about funding, like how do you apply for funding? Where do you even look? How do you pitch it? That kind of thing. Or there was one that was a storytelling collider where you got together with someone who did completely different research and tried to understand how to explain what you do, right? Those kinds of things really stick in my mind and made connections between students that I'll remember for the future, but that was just at the consortium level. And so maybe what I would have liked to see is some of that at the GoMRI level, because like, you know, I'm sitting next to a sociologist and we just met today. We're going to be friends forever, but but I would have liked to meet her a few years back. So trying to make those connections between consortia. There was also a summer working group that happened at NC, so UC Santa Barbara, that was amazing because it did bring together students and PIs from all sorts of different backgrounds, and again, that just at a larger level. So if it had been student mixers at some of these GoMRI events, maybe, and maybe like some speed dating, you know, try to get to know people and understand their projects better. Because I think when I look at other people's research, if it's not in my field, I'm just about as educated as someone you pull off the street, right? Like you have to dumb it down for me, and so having moments where people simplify their talks and their content enough to engage people completely out of their field. I think a few more events like that would have helped. But by and large, like it was great.
Nikaela, I'll throw the same question to you. Would you like to add anything about what GoMRI might have done different to engage students, besides more pay?
Oh, that would have been nice. No, I'm kidding. No. No, in terms of what GoMRI could have done differently to engage students, one thing that I know is that each year I deeply appreciated attending the GoMRI conferences because it allowed me to meet up with fellow grad students that from other consortia who were doing bioinformatics studies just like I was. That I wouldn't ordinarily get an opportunity to interact with outside the scope of my consortia. because there are very few people within my consortia who were doing the work that I was doing, at least on a graduate level. And so in terms of things that I feel like GoMRI could have done differently to engage students is just like more opportunities to engage with our peers on a graduate level in terms of engagement, outreach, webinar-based interactions. Those are just a few things that although they weren't readily there, it's hindsight's 2020. But the fact is that GoMRI still allowed these conferences for us to interact and engage and catch up, and it still in the end allowed me to form some strong collaborative relationships with fellow students outside my consortia.
Great, thank you. All right, Kathryn, I got a doozy for you. You ready?
Ready.
If you were invited to testify before a congressional committee, you're given 4 sentences. This is Congress, right? It's a soundbite, right? So it's got to be short. Basically, you're trying to convince a congressional committee for another 10 years of funding for GoMRI. What would you say?
Oh, wow. I'm glad I heard that question.
So I'm going to give her time to think. Unfortunately, I don't know
Second.
any good jokes to are you ready?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I would say that interdisciplinary research matters in terms of preparation, response, and restoration in the event of a future spill, and as we continue to understand Deepwater Horizon.
Okay, great. Cheng, I'll throw the same question to you. What would you say to the congressional committee to convince them for another 10 years of funding?
I think I would say there's a lot of field that needs to be researched. And, this is, in general, very good work, and it gathers a large group of interdisciplinary group and conduct basic research, applied research to investigate the impact of an oil spill to our environment. It's of vital importance for our environment, for our next generations.
Great, great. How are we on time? We're okay? Okay, great. All right. Speaking a little bit more specifically, I'll throw this to who? I'll throw this back to you, okay? Are there areas or aspects of your research that have been greatly augmented by GoMRI? You mentioned interdisciplinary. Are there specific angles or aspects that?
Yeah, I would say with regard to my research, since I started my work on the RCYC project in 2016, I've been, largely involved with sociologists and people in public health. But one of the things that my involvement in RCYC and being able to, come and meet folks at the GoMoses conference and sort of tap into that larger community sort of led me to sort of have a better understanding of was, as a social worker and somebody who's deeply interested in the practice and policy implications of the research that everybody is doing here with regard to the spill, how could I potentially employ my kind of macro level social work skills along with the skills that I was developing as a sociological researcher, and that kind of led me to apply for the Gulf Research Program Science Policy Fellowship last year. I received the fellowship and worked for a year in a sort of applied policy role with the Gulf Coast Ecosystem Restoration Council, Restore Council in New Orleans. It was an excellent experience for me that has sort of changed my thinking about where I might fit in the future in terms of applied work and policy work, and how my sociology background and my social work background might lend itself to that interdisciplinary work that's so necessary for for the ongoing monitoring and restoration work that's going on in the Gulf. So, you know, not as much with my my research agenda, but more with my long-term sort of career goals.
Okay, sorry, I was being whispered to in my ear. Great, thank you. Chen, do you have advice for younger students who would follow in your footsteps? Do you have advice for younger students who would follow in your footsteps?
Work hard.
Work hard. That's great. Anybody else want to add to that? Kate, any idea?
Well, so I work with a lot of students now, mentoring students in their PhDs, and I struggle a little bit with how to help them have an experience similar to what I had, because there was so much energy around the work I was doing and enthusiasm for it, and that kind of helps you through the tough times, right? When things aren't going well or you're demoralized, like having a community of people who believe in what you're doing and want you to succeed and care about your results really pushes you through. And so with the students I work with now, we really do try to walk that line between let's find a project that, you know, we have data for and we can make incremental progress on, but also like something that people really care about, that walks that line between between basic research and something that's at least a little bit applied, so that you have people around you who really care about the outcome and will ping on you and say, how's it going? You know, so that you finish.
Have something to add.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so for me, we're done with the GoMRI 10 years of research. Now we have a lot of publications. For future students, when they're doing the same research, they have to do a lot of literature review. And I would suggest that if it's possible, because the knowledge database is fast changing. For example, like 30 years ago, when you want to do a research, you do literature review, probably you'd conduct maybe a week of literature review, and that's it. Now, if you want to do literature review, there's a lot of papers to go through, and I would, so it's not really suggestion for students, but suggestion for advisor or the committee members. It would be good to have some well-written and basic introductory things for those coming students. Those things are really essential to get them on board for this kind of research, because it's interdisciplinary research. They are on a really steep learning curve. So I think it's important for us actually to do those things.
Ken, you mind if I touch on that for a second as well? So through my experience with the ACER Consortium, working in Dr. Sebecki's lab, I've had the opportunity over the years to be able to mentor a series of undergraduate students. And the thing is that the undergraduate students in our lab, they don't just stay in our lab for 1 year. They stay most oftentimes for all 4 years. And that's because one of the things they always express is Nikaela is always excited about her work. My thing is that if I could, you know, give them advice in terms of whether to pursue a line of research, rather than, you know, stating it to them, I show it through my actions and the intent and thought that I put into my work. We get students in our lab who come from the School of Nursing, chemistry, of course, pre-med, and the little joke that I tell them, I was like, you know, if you leave here after being in the lab, working in the lab for 4 years in these projects confused, then I've succeeded. So no, yeah, but no, so no, in terms of, you know, like, yeah. So just to point to that, you know, rather than just stating it and just the sheer joy and thought and intent that, you know, as grad students, postdocs, you know, physical scientists, we put into our work, you know, that speaks volumes over just iterating it through statements.
Great, thank you. So we're sort of drawing to the close of a long program, a very successful program with GoMRI Scholars. We're going to go out on a feel-good moment, if that's okay. Can each of you briefly tell us what your greatest memory of being part of GoMRI is? Who wants to go first? There are so many great memories. You all are really, no, it's good.
I'll go ahead and go first. Actually, I have two really great memories. The first great memory is when I got an opportunity to go out on my first sampling trip. We went to, Dr. Sawecki's right there smiling. No, with Acer. So no, typically I'm usually stuck to the bench or the computer. And so this time we were able to actually go out, I was able to go out to the chandeliers and see the system that I've been working on for so many years. And, you know, it was just dynamic. You know, it was awe-inspiring, you know, and, you know, working alongside Dr. Mortazavi's lab and collecting the samples and the cores, that's a memory, just the whole trip in general. It's a memory that's gonna last with me for quite a while. This is my second most memorable memory is when I got my first paper published that involved the genomics that I had been working on for year 2 of our consortium. And so for me, it was just all of it coming to a head in terms of like, this is real, this is tangible, it's peer-reviewed, this is mine, no one can take it away from me. And whoever the peer reviewers were, they respected it enough to give it a green light. So I think that's, you know, consistent with any researcher in terms of that sentiment, in terms of how they feel like when they've been working on a particular technique for so much time, and then it finally gets the green light from, you know, anonymous peer reviewers, you know. So yeah.
That's good. Anybody else want to add their best memory?
Yeah, I can go ahead and share. So with our project, we had a series of surveys, and they were face-to-face surveys, so we had a team of interviewers that were out in the field doing, you know, the survey with the people that were involved in the survey. But then in between 2 of our survey waves, we did a focus group element with a subsample of folks that had been participating in the survey. And so we sort of broke our research team up into 2 groups, and we had 6 focus groups in different parts of Southeast Louisiana. And so I went with half of the team to 3 of the focus groups, and it was a really great experience, you know, in terms of professional experience, learning to sort of coordinate, organize, and sort of do outreach and like, you know, contact our participants, let them know we were doing the focus group, and you know, figure out a venue and all of that. I love doing that kind of stuff just to begin with. But then once we actually got in the field, we were doing the focus groups. We had one in Houma, Louisiana, and it was in the evening, and we had a really large group turn up in that community to the focus group, and a lot of people brought their kids. So it was just a really lively group that had a lot to say in response to the questions that we had sort of prepped to guide the focus group. And then, you know, we had brought food and everything to go along with that. But afterwards, we had a smaller group of folks that stayed and just talked about all sorts of things, what they liked about the community, and talked about some of the parades and things that happened in the town. And it was just, in terms of field work, one of my favorite memories from RCYC, and I feel humbled to have been a part of it. And you know, a lot of work had gone into setting everything up and hoping people would show up for those focus groups, because the people in our project were parents with kids. They're busy. You know, you can send them information and hope that they come and share their experiences. And that one in particular was just a really cool research moment for me.
Good, thank you.
So.
Going once, going twice?
One really good day was the day that CImage got its first book published a couple of years ago, I think it was. And man, it was just so much work went into putting that together, and so many people put in chapters, and we were all, you know, submitting things and writing our brains out, and the day it all came together into these 2 volumes of stuff that we had actually accomplished over the last of so many years was just a moment of like relief and delight to see it all come together.
Cheng?
One of my memorable experience is when my wave tank firstly assembled and it can first generate breaking waves. That's the first time I saw breaking waves generated in the lab, and it's actually, the wave tank is designed by me and assembled by me, so I was really excited at that time. Second experience I think most memorable is when we do mesocosm experiment in Potransis, which is hosted by Ed Buskey's group. We did a lot of experiments at that time, and we also enjoyed the seafood there too.
Yeah, that's good. So the 4 of you are about to hear a big round of applause, thanking you for your contributions to the panel. But I would remind the audience that what they're also thanking you for is all your hard work and effort, all your data collection, all your analyses, and perhaps most importantly, being a great colleague and being the future of the science that you're taking with you. So shall we give them a round of applause?